Hi guys, welcome to Star Wars Timeline. Today I have Meg, one of my favorite guests that we're back to, and we're discussing the women of Star Wars. In our previous podcast, we talked about the females of the prequels. Now, Meg, could you please introduce yourself to our new audience, explain what your channel is and what kind of content you do?
Sure. So my name is Meg. I have a channel on YouTube called Meg Reviews where I review both Legends and new canons books, as well as sometimes do some videos like short Star Wars related topics. So right now I am reading the second set of High Republic books, as well as I'm working my way through the new Jedi Order series.
Nice. Yeah, I'm a little bit behind on the High Republic novels. I think the next one I'm going to read is Out of the Shadows by Justina Ireland. Do you like her writing style? Are you a fan of hers?
I do like hers. I have read, she has a non-Star Wars, like original fiction YA series that like alternate history that I thought was really good. So far I've only read her middle grade High Republic book, but I really enjoyed it. So I also have Out of the Shadows next, and I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, nice. Okay, so we could probably compare notes, and maybe that would be a nice topic for discussion. Anyway, but to quickly catch up and explain to our audience who haven't seen the previous podcast what we're all about. So I met you by actually checking out your YouTube videos and seeing how you're doing reviews on Star Wars books, and you're very knowledgeable. And I thought, gee, okay, I need to introduce a new element for my channel that I do Star Wars, reviews and character highlights. Let's do a kind of like long form conversation where two fans come together. We don't have to agree on everything, but the idea is to have this open discussion, and I really wanted your perspective and your point of view as a female Star Wars fan, from your first experience as an adult, as a younger person. In our previous podcast, what we did was we discussed the women in prequels. We talked about Padme Amidala in the movies, how she functioned a little bit in the TV show, The Clone Wars, and other women in the prequels. Now, I want to continue. This is basically part 2 of this podcast, where we're going to talk about the women of the original Star Wars trilogy, and hopefully encapsulate all of the sequels, Rey and so forth, and conclude there. So the first big topic that I want to cover, obviously, is the women in the original trilogy, or the woman in the original trilogy. Could you please tell me, what was your first impression of Leia in episode 4 specifically?
I remember seeing her thinking she had such a distinctive look, but then even once beyond seeing her look, what a firecracker she was, what a strong, feisty woman she was. In my family, we have a really big love of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. We've watched the 6-hour BBC miniseries a lot, and she gives me a lot of the same feel that Elizabeth Bennet does, where she is not afraid to speak her mind. She is not afraid to take charge when things aren't going well. But she also has this very kind, nurturing aspect to her as well, which I can really see when she's comforting Luke when they're fleeing from the Death Star. But this is a woman that just lost her entire planet, but she's still capable of seeing someone who's in pain and helping them.
Yeah.
Leia made a big impact on me, I think, watching Star Wars.
And obviously, I think you echo what a lot of young women around the world experienced as well, seeing this movie, the original fans, women who saw it in the 70s. We discussed that beautiful little cosplay photograph that you and I, and of course it's traveling across the internet and social media. She's wearing that X-Wing suit. Wonderful, wonderful. So it's such a wonderful thing to see when, popular media and entertainment affects people in such a positive way and says look, Star Wars is for everyone, really. My personal impression was when I was a kid, growing up in the 80s in the Soviet Union. It was the last couple of years of the Soviet Union. By then, we were still quite a conservative society, but not nearly how Soviet Union was at its height post-World War II. Very, very strict, very formal. Women are supposed. The gender roles were very, very much outlined of how people were supposed to behave. And even within that system, women achieved quite prolific like stature in society, like take high positions professionally, professors, doctors, and so forth. Women were not shunned in Soviet regime, Soviet Union from these high positions. So I remember seeing it as a kid in the 80s, and I never questioned, honestly, her. I'm like, oh, she's able to do what guys are doing. They're finally putting her on the same level with the rest of the guys. For me, it was, oh, this is what she can do. This is pretty interesting. She was always a part of the team. She was always an equal. And like you pointed it out, what really distinguishes her from Han and Luke in episode 4, that's where we started, is that she's really feisty, and she is not afraid to say what she needs to say. If Luke is a little bit, she's like a whiny teenager, and like he has a lot of misgivings, about what to do. He's not even sure if he's going to go out and help, Kenobi. Where Han is like more he has this front, right? That he's like this cocky, independent guy, and he wants nobody to tell him his business. She is the one that really contrasts well with the rest of them. And that's actually the question that I wanted to ask you. How did you like her interaction with Luke and Han? Because we sort of have this love triangle theme going on before, obviously, the original trilogy ideas evolve and Leia becomes something entirely else. What was your reaction to that love triangle and how she interacts with Han and Luke?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's definitely, from the very beginning in A New Hope, this tension between Leia and Han, where, Leia will snipe at Han will say something, and Leia will respond, and you can tell Han's sort of like, whoa, like, whoa. And with Luke, I feel like there's a lot more of like a rapport of equals. Like, I feel with Han, you can see the tension that they're going to build in The Empire Strikes Back. But with Luke, it just seems like they work together so well as soon as they meet each other. And Han is a lot more willing to question her and to push back on her. But with Luke, they just sort of like, I don't know. I know that Lucas had no idea at that point in time that they were going to be siblings, but with that in my mind, I could sort of see that the way that they just work so well together. And it's definitely a different dynamic than what she has with Han.
Mm-hmm. But you did get a sense of that there is something going on between the three, that tension.
Yeah. It definitely seemed like with Han, there's sort of this like adversarial element. And with Luke, it's just sort of like these two people fit together and work together so well.
Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, I was quite shy, and even like into my later teens, like approaching girls and saying like, hi, I like you, I think you're cute. It was quite a challenge. I think it's true for most of the boys, really. So I could identify more the way she interacts with Luke, where, how they say that sometimes, or in some societies, in certain examples, women generally mature faster emotionally because, they're preparing to be mothers, the biology kicks in, and they need to be more like self-aware in that sense. So I could always, from my perspective as a guy, I could identify with Luke because I was like, oh, I'm like him. I don't know what to say to a girl, because she honestly felt more mature and seasoned than Luke is. I mean, they're the same age, obviously, they're twins, but she feels like she has that regal aura about her, that she's a senator.
Yeah.
She has a professional career in the Senate. That's quite big for a 19-year-old versus this like farmer boy who like tinkers around with like basic technology and like around Tasha Station. All he wants to do is fly around and shoot wampa rats. You're like, okay, what a comparison there. And as a kid also, I did not understand that what Han and Leia have is sexual tension. Mm-hmm. She is digging him. Like you could tell, as you watch it with adult eyes, the intent is there. Like you said, George Lucas did not quite know that he's going to add this plot twist in episode 5 where Luke, I'm your father, and continue further that thought and say, okay, well, Leia is going to be his twin sister. And by some kind of like freak accident, the actors just look close enough, like they could pass as the twins.
Yeah.
But in the episode 4 specifically, I didn't see it. I thought like Han is just being an asshole. He's like, he's almost like shoving her off to the side. He's like, hey, don't tell me what to do. I'm the man here. This is my ship. And she's like, That's not going to pass here, not with me. And she proves that the testament to the strength of her character is that she is intelligent. She finds the answers and solutions to her problems where Han doesn't. And I found that quite interesting. And let's talk about how from that point forward, I specifically wanted to ask you about episode 4, but let's talk about how Leia's character grows in episode 5 and 6, because in 5, she's clearly something different. What's going on there? How did you see the transition from episode 4 to 5?
Yeah, I think when episode 5 opens, what's really obvious to me is how comfortable she is in a leadership role in the Rebel Alliance. Mm-hmm. I always got the sense from episode 4 that she was involved, but since she was a senator, it was very much, something that had to be hidden. But in Empire Strikes Back, she's directing the snowspeeder pilots. She's there in the communications hub. She's one of the last people to leave when Darth Vader and the Imperials breach the base. But at the same time, you can obviously see that tension with Han has developed to the point that they're literally arguing in the hallways. Like, people are walking in between the two of them, which says to me that they do this so often that it's just become routine. Like, they're doing it again. And you just walk in between them. And I think with Leia, her wardrobe is a really interesting way of showing how her character is changing and progressing. So in Empire Strikes Back, when we see her in the beginning, she's still wearing white. She's wearing that white snowsuit. But when she gets to Cloud City and when, she and Han basically admit their feelings for each other, she's wearing an outfit that Lando provided, but it's that beautiful burgundy, like the tunic and the leggings, and then that overdressed outfit.
Yeah, I really like that. I really enjoyed it as a kid. It was so striking and beautiful.
Oh, it's so pretty. And it's just the way, she goes from being that white, all in white princess to, as the story gets a little bit more romantic, we get a much more, I guess, romantic outfit from her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember seeing it. For me, the original trilogy was one entity. It was really one movie because my father brought the tapes. We saw it all together in one sling. And that's how it was. It was one long story. And only when we got to episode 5 and that first interaction in the hallway with Han, that's when it dawned on me, like, oh, they're into each other. They like each other, but it's not going to be easy. And as an adult, obviously, the deeper layer of meaning that I found how these characters are written, it was interesting observation that you pointed out that she is a leadership figure. She's the face of the alliance. She directs pilots. She tells them what needs to be done, what's the evacuation procedure. But in regards to her inner feelings, emotions, she's still a kid. And she doesn't quite know how to express herself, and she's learning the ropes. And what's cool about Han is he projects that out of calm and confidence. And obviously, Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford behind the screens, they had a little fling. He's a very charismatic guy, right? He's the swashbuckling hero that you're looking for. For quite a period of time, it was not Luke, it was Han who was like, he's the guy, right? But he's also, in regards to expressing his emotions, because perhaps he was a loner. We didn't know his background back then. He is also finding it a bit of a challenge to express his love to her. He's like, hey, like, you're not saying it. Well, I'm not going to say it as well if you're not saying it, but I want you to say. And it's like, it's back and forth, and it makes such an interesting dynamic of a guy who's older than her and is more confident in his space, and she's more confident in her professional career, but they come to this clash of where love and the deeper feelings are involved. So I found that quite lovely. And specifically, I wanted to mention this detail about just superficial stuff, Leia's appearance. When I saw her in the films, throughout the entire trilogy, I always thought that she is what is an attractive woman, especially obviously when you see everyone sees her in the slave Leia outfit. She's an ideal, beautiful body. She's a beautiful woman. But I never found her my type as a kid for some reason. Something about her, like facial proportions, something about her, I was like, would I date her? Like, probably not, but like, she's attractive. But what's funny about the episode 5? There's one specific scene where they're on Bespin and they're making their escape, and they fail to save Han. Right, the Boba Fett in his slave ship, slave one, he flies away, and her and Lando Calrissian fire off a couple of rounds, and there's that one shot where you look at Leia's face and the shadow hits her just properly enough. I fell in love there. You know how, like, when we look at, still shots, photographs of people, of like how your face is illuminated this way, in another picture is completely different. Some magic happened there visually. I remember specifically the moment where I fell in love with her. I was like, oh my gosh, she's amazing, And now let's talk about episode 6. Like, how does Leia's role and character evolve and change in episode 6?
Yeah, it's very interesting to me because in the, getting Han out of Jabba's palace, obviously Luke is the main important part. Like, they're all slowly assembling, waiting for Luke. But I find it really telling how Leia feels about Han, that, they're all getting in place. She gets in place, and it's not clear whether this is part of the plan or not, that she gets him out of the carbonite. It's almost as though she gets into Jabba's palace, she's in place for the plan, and then it's like, okay, I can't wait any longer. I'm getting him out. And I just feel like Leia in Return of the Jedi, for me, I think of all the original trilogy movies, I mean, I know there's only 3 of them.
Yeah.
Empire is probably my favorite, but I've watched Return of the Jedi the most because I love the conclusion in Return of the Jedi. I love how Luke reveals to her, we're related, we have the same parents, and she's just sort of like, yeah, okay. It's not a big revelation to her. She just knows. And then I think I've said this before, but bringing the Ewoks into the rebel operations, that solely comes down to Leia. I mean, probably C-3PO as well, but I just love the bits in the trilogy when she gets to show how kind she is, and that's one of them there. I guess I like Return of the Jedi. I just like how it shows the culmination of Han and Leia's relationship, and just like once they get it worked out, how good they are together. And then just also all those times Leia gets to show how kind she is.
Yeah. In episode 6, I found that Leia grows quite considerably. And I think it's also partially because she also grows as an actress. Her professional skills and talent as an actress evolve. And in episode 6, which I love, I don't put any one original trilogy film on a pedestal. They're all equally amazing to me. And in 6, when I rewatch it continuously, there's a couple of things. Just the tone of her voice, the way she modulates it, and the dialogue that she reads in the scenes. For me, she assumes the role of the mother. A lot of, in mythology and folklore, the female lead, regardless of age, it has nothing to do with age or actually physically being a mom. It's her, this motherly care and this birth-giving miracle of what every woman is capable of. She bestows that upon all the heroes in the film. The way that she talks to Han, it's not that she's smarter, or the script somehow wants to specifically position her in a very contrived way and say, well, we'll see, women can be smart too. There's none of that aggressive storytelling. It's also natural and fluid. And she, when she has that conversation with Luke on Endor Moon, for me, it's the most beautiful scene in Star Wars. It is so theatrical and so beautifully and deliberately exaggerated in the line delivery, and the way that she's talking to Luke. She's a mom to him in that moment. The mother that she, remember, he says, I have no memory of my mother. And she tries to explain to him, and she says, look, run away if you don't feel like you want to do this. And when he tells her it's something that I need to do, I need to face my father, she gives him that mother's approval. She's like, I'm behind you. It's not an easy decision. I may not like it. She's obviously distraught about that. But the way that she accepts it, it shows so much maturity in her. And I completely, I loved and I embraced it. And Carrie Fisher, if there's one movie where her acting reaches like its absolute peak, it's The Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Let me see. And the next question I actually want to ask before we move into the sequels is, was Leia a good role model to you in terms of like setting as an example for a young, American girl? And did you see herself in any particular way as a teenager in Leia?
Yeah, I think for me, Leia's a good role model in that she can be very diplomatic, but when she needs to speak up, she can speak up. And I think as a young teen, I that was what terrified me was speaking up.
Mm,
I didn't want to do that, but seeing examples like Leia showed me that like she's a tiny woman. She's a tiny woman, but she's not afraid to speak her mind. And
mhm.
so you can, also feel like you're not physically imposing at all, but still have this like strength of character and just like strength behind your convictions, which I think was very, very inspiring to me when I was younger.
Wow. So very, very empowering, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Very quickly, Leia isn't the only woman in the original trilogy. We also have Aunt Beru. I just wanted to like have your quick thoughts. What did you think about her? Does she add anything to the films?
Yeah, I really like Aunt Beru. I like the contrast between her and Uncle Owen. That uncle, you could tell that they both want what's best for Luke,
Hmm.
but Uncle Owen is very abrasive. He's just like, no, we can't spare you right now. And Aunt Beru's the one that's gentler, sort of. So I see her working well with Uncle Owen, and that probably he, says, Luke, you can do this, you can't do that. But Beru like tempers it and makes it easier to accept. We see so little of her in A New Hope, but I
Yeah.
do really like what we see of her.
Yeah, like you said, I really don't have too much to add. That her small role is memorable and meaningful because she's a counterbalance to Uncle Owen. But even from that small exchange where he walks in the morning and she's preparing like some breakfast, you could tell they're very different kinds of people, but they're
Mhm.
obviously in love. They love and they respect each other, and it's that moment of the story behind the screen or off screen, which it almost I imagine people watching it in the 70s like wanted more of that. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
can we get the background here? Because I always saw Lars Owen as Anakin Skywalker's brother. To me, anything otherwise doesn't exist. That's his brother. His younger or whatever brother left off to war, and that's why partially Lars is so angered, and he knows that what happens that his brother is either dead, missing in action, or it's possibly he knows that he turns into Vader. Regardless of that, it's that you can understand his misgivings and why he wants to control, as a conservative father would in America in the 70s and
Mhm.
60s, right? And say like, no, I know what's best for you, boy. And even when he tells him, look, go do your chores, go do stuff, it's sensible stuff that he's telling him. He's not like ripping on him, like, hey,
Yeah.
he's not abusing him. He wants what's best for him. So yeah,
Yeah.
Aunt Beru was like against this motherly figure, and it's a gentler one, like you said. She levels off her husband in that way. So that was pretty cool. So do you feel that the original trilogy could have used more female characters, or it's something that the story doesn't really necessitate?
I guess that's the thing. There's obviously, you'll see women in background roles. So in the Rebel Alliance, you have Mon Mothma. Then you'll also see some in background roles. Jabba's Palace, you see them in background roles. I feel like Leia's such a strong presence that I don't always notice the lack of them. I guess for equality reasons, I would have loved more
Right.
and more with lines, but they're more sometimes visible, but you don't hear a lot from them.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
So we nailed the original trilogy in pretty much the first half of our podcast. Hopefully, we get to run through the sequels. I'm really, really excited to talk to you about this, obviously, because of its main heroine. If I do get to ramble on, please stop me where we need to. But I'm just super excited to talk about this stuff with you. So now we're talking about the women in sequels. And the first question I want to hit you off with is, what was your reaction to the first announcement that we're going to have a female lead in the entire trilogy?
I was really excited. I I mean, I love Leia and I love Padme, but especially coming off of the prequels, I felt like I did want that. I wanted that female lead going on a hero's journey. And yeah, hearing that we were going to have a female lead and not knowing anything about it, but hoping that she would be like the Luke or Anakin of the sequel trilogy, I was really excited about.
Now compare that first feeling, that first excitement, because we were all super, super hyped, to what you actually see in the first sequel movie, Episode 7. How is who is Rey in Episode 7, and is it something, did it live up to your expectation?
Yeah, so Rey, there's a lot of comparisons that you could make between Episode 7 and Episode 4, but I think a very important one to me is that Rey has lived on her own since she was a small child, since she was probably 5. So she's had to become like a very strong person to defend herself against, anything she encounters. But at the same time, I think that we see her, and what we see is like with Leia, how kind she is, that she sees, someone with BB-8 and she helps him despite herself. And then she just sort of ends up letting this droid tag along with her, and then getting mixed up with all these other people as well, because she tries to be a loner. She tries to be, strong and just needing no one else to rely on. But at the same time, she, I think, wants to help the people around her, and gets dragged into this adventure because of that innate helpfulness in her.
And before I kind of give you my thoughts on this, I really want to follow the track of your thoughts first. Going on with the TFA, The Force Awakens, how did you feel Rey and the equality issues are handled in that film?
I feel like I didn't think that. I thought that.
Yeah.
No, I thought that the way they built it up was that, Rey.
Take your time.
I know, thinking. I thought that Rey was so strong. I loved that she got to be sort of the center of the story, even though she doesn't really come into it as a main part until Finn gets on Jakku.
Yeah.
And I guess this ties into the way that the fights are staged, but she's obviously someone who's very proficient with a staff.
Yeah.
And I love how that plays out in the lightsaber fight at the end with Kylo Ren, that, she sort of has this innate sense of how to use a lightsaber, but at the same time, she's trying to use a lightsaber like a staff. You see her using it, you're like, oh, honey, don't use it like that. Yeah. Which I thought was so good, because of course, she's hit people with a stick all her life, and you give her a laser sword and she's going to try to do the same thing.
Yeah, you're actually going into the second segment that I wanted to ask you about. But if I could also jump in and share my thoughts on this.
Yeah.
I was super excited that we're going to get a female lead. I said, well, yeah, time is right. Let's do it. Just do it correctly. Do it in a way that's meaningful and interesting. And that was my initial kind of excitement to it. And aside from the fact that I felt it somewhat grating that the film replicates a lot of plot points from the episode 4 in New Hope. It's essentially more or less a clone of the episode 4 with some new content in there, because we have a cast of new heroes and they do have their own adventures there, so it's like a melting pot between old and new. But I really enjoyed who Rey is in The Force Awakens. I love the fact that she's different from Luke, and same in different ways. They all follow a story of coming of age, young heroes who must find their own place in this larger universe. And they all both are naive young people who need to learn this larger world. But where Luke is somebody who had a lot of hand holding and he had love and comfort of a family, it's something that she never knew. And
Yeah.
that's established from the beginning of the film. She is a woman that looks after herself. You could call her whatever you want in the future films, and we'll get to the rest of it and talk about the sequel trilogy as a whole. But in that film, it is well established who she is. And I did like the parallels with Luke, but I was like, oh, she's not like Luke. She knows how to handle herself with a fight. She knows how to fight with a stick. And later on, it's sort of sensible because the way that she handles herself and what happens to Kylo Ren, and we'll talk about this, it's okay. The only minor thing that I felt was like, and it's a technical execution thing, where she's like, when Finn tries to hold her hand and help her up, she's like, stop holding my hand. It was funny the first time we hear it. For the next 3 or 4 times that we hear, it's not funny anymore. I'm like, you're beating the dead horse. I'm like, it's just not effective. Say it once, people get their laughs, they get the idea. Okay, she was pushing a little bit too hard. It's like, yes, representation button. You know, it's like, enough, we get it. Because later on, when Finn is like out of commission and, you know, one explosions happens, she helps him up. She gives him her hand. It makes sense. Counterbalance. 2 heroes helping each other. Nobody's overshadowing no one else. They're standing on equal ground. So yeah, I was excited, and it completely fulfilled my expectation from that regard. Rey was the hero I was on board with in episode 7. But now here's another caveat. Rey not only is capable with the stick and later on with a lightsaber, she has access to all of these force powers now, which were not related to her in any way. She knows how to do things, how to sense them. She taps into her, you know, consciousness when she fights Kylo Ren in the final duel. She's able to read his mind. She's able to manipulate stormtroopers. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, it was like, I did feel to a certain extent like it was too much. Like, I think I would have liked it better if those were foreshadowed. If maybe when we saw her alone on Jakku, we also saw her maybe doing some things like that, where I think that would make sense to me, that if she's all alone and she's been all alone for over 10 years, that if she has these innate abilities, she would maybe start to play with them. But they do, like, reading Kylo's mind and being able to, like, you know, really center herself. We don't see her doing those earlier. So it does feel like they sort of, for me, like, it felt like they came out of nowhere. And I do like when if there would have been, like, those would have been a callback to something that we had seen before.
Yeah. You know, it almost felt like, you know, episode 7, it's like Star Wars on crack, on like to the power of 10th, because it, you know, it felt like J.J. Abrams wanted to distill all of the past legacy of Star Wars and cram it all into these characters, where, and he said, I remember clearly, when you're going to hear the title of the film, it's going to make total sense to you, because that's the story I want to tell. It's just Force rises in this character, and equal and opposite thing is happening on the other side with Kylo Ren. So I understood where he was going with it, but at times it felt just a little bit much. I'm like, I don't know about this. When she's able to sense and feel things, it's understandable, because people, the denizens of the Star Wars universe, talk about the Force. They're aware of it. They understand what it is. Later on in episode 8, she tells Luke, I've always sensed it. I always knew it's a part of me. It almost feels like she is coming out of her Force closet, and she's saying that, look, I was aware of it all this time. I just didn't know what to do with it. I was afraid, which is like this sheltered and shelled kind of like existence.
Yeah.
Too much. It could explode out of me. I believed that until we get into episode 9 and the whole last name thing. Again, we will get to it. But before we get to the concluding with Rey and like understanding who she is, can you please answer this one question, which the internet will never drop this question for decades to come? Is Rey a Mary Sue?
I don't think she is, because I feel like for something to be a Mary Sue, they just achieve things and there's no struggle. Like, things just come to them. They just magically have friends. They just magically get these skills. And like, there's no trial involved. It doesn't take any effort. And even though sometimes Rey's stuff, especially her force abilities, feel like, whoa, that's a lot very suddenly.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's always effort on her part. And so I wouldn't call her a Mary Sue just because, she's trying. She's trying so hard.
Yeah. I felt that her journey and her set of roadblocks are emotional and psychological ones. If Luke is somebody who we see suffer and train, and there's consequence and the lopped off arm, and very physical traumatic experiences. With her, it's always the emotional stuff. She's like constantly asking this question: who am I? What am I doing here? It's something that every young person asks, and I could always relate to that. Like, who am I as a person? But by the time that we get to the episode 8 and then to episode 9, I personally would not call her a Mary Sue, because there is some cognitive stuff happening there. There is intent on the behalf of both directors, JJ and Rian Johnson, to give her some kind of things to wrestle with. Like you said, she doesn't achieve automatically, but some things she does. We see her practice with Luke Skywalker on Acto on the island. And then she goes in and she's like kicking ass with next to Kylo Ren. She's like, all of these clear fencing forms and skills come from. I'm like, where's this stuff coming from? Yeah, it's awesome to watch. And I do enjoy her character. And I love the emotional journey she's on. But it's like, couldn't we have spend a little less time on Canto Bight and that whole nonsential, how do you call it? The Caesar's Palace or something like that, or casino, and
it's like Space Las Vegas,
right? Because there's a wonderful scene which didn't make it into the final cut of the film. I don't know if you saw it, where Luke teaches her another lesson, where she runs to that village, and she thinks that it's some kind of struggle and innocents are being attacked by some kind of like pirates or something, and then Luke is standing there, he's laughing at her. It's like, don't rush into things, slow down a little bit, have a feel for things going on, and. So it's not easy to defend whether she's a Mary Sue or not. I personally wouldn't, because my argument is there's enough of narrative stuff there, like the meat and potatoes, to state that she's on an emotional journey and she struggles with her self-identity, and that's her growth. That's the whole point. And in the defense of J.J. Abrams specifically, is that the reason that we get to things quicker is because the director felt like, hey, how things work in this franchise. Student learns, he gets the power, he's able to do it. I'm just going to dial up the speed on that to get to it quicker, because I want everybody to see the fun. It's rushed. It's a little bit too fast, and I think all of us would agree that the trilogy would have benefited from a little bit more planning. Slow down a little bit, because the sensibility of modern Hollywood filmmaking versus the time of where original trilogies made, things are layered to you, and they're given to you in proper due time. But how did you feel specifically about Rey's training scene on Acto versus Luke training on Dagobah with Yoda?
Yeah, I felt like on Acto, in a way, Luke, I think we're supposed to see Luke and think of Yoda, think of how like cranky Yoda was, but for me, in Empire Strikes Back, once Luke realizes who Yoda is, then Yoda is like not really doing that anymore. He's training him. He's giving him his all. And Luke, like the whole time Rey's on Acto, Luke does not want to train her. Luke is he goes beyond cranky. He's just, he wants to be completely withdrawn from the world. So I wish we could have seen more, I guess, of her training, because it feels like there's not a lot. And I really like some of the imagery there. I especially love when she goes down to the cave, but when there's not a lot to go off of with her interacting with Luke, because he's a bad teacher. He doesn't really teach anything.
Well, this is one point where I would like to disagree with you. So in looking at it now, we see that big part of what Yoda teaches Luke on Dagobah, it's not the physical stuff. We literally see Luke do 2 backflips, a little bit of running, handstand, lifting rocks, which some people have problems with Rey doing. Luke lifts rocks, dude. It's like he does literally the same things. And we actually never see Luke practice any form of sword fencing.
No, that is true. He goes straight into the battle with Vader.
And who's supposed to be the baddest Sith Lord out there. And he's able to hold his own until his arm is chopped off. You know what I mean? So I felt that the scene in episode 8 with Luke and Rey is wonderful. It's one of my favorite scenes in the entire Star Wars saga. And I'll tell you why. Because being the unwilling mentor that he is, he's still a mentor to her. He is showing her through incident, or I should say through the unintentionally, that this is what a Jedi goes through. Mm-hmm. There's a moment of disillusionment, disappointment. I don't want to have anything to do with this. He's showing her by example. And then when he says, okay, I will give you lessons. There's this absolutely beautiful return of Star Wars to its Eastern roots, the Japanese cinema, the samurai cinema, where teaches her a moment of Zen. He hits her with a little leaf. Feel the Force. He tells her exactly what Yoda says to Luke, and we actually see her practice with a lightsaber. And the argument is to be made was Luke spends more time on Dagobah, and that's why when he comes to the Bespin, he's able to fight and do all these things. I'm like, really? Luke spent months on Dagobah while his boy Han is getting tortured to death by Vader. I don't see it. I'm seeing a day maximum too. He's like, see ya, guys. I'll be back. I gotta go save my friends. He's headstrong. That's who Luke is. But he's also headstrong in episode 8. And that's why Yoda is there to come and teach him this final lesson. He teaches Rey about the Force. She does a little bit of Force training. She has that wonderful moment of in the cave where I almost saw that image as your identity doesn't matter. Every move, every motion that you make through your life journey creates a ripple. And you could your life's path could go any one direction. All depends on you. And when the 2 images of her parents resolve into one, it's telling you it's on you. Don't look to the past. Don't look to your parents. It's you. It's your story. And when one of the most cool moments there was, which not a lot of people for some reason are talking about, when Luke talks about the hubris of the Jedi. I'm not a huge fan of the prequels, but I love that Rian Johnson includes that into the story. He gives meaning and credence to the prequel movies. He says, look, this is who the Jedi were. They were at the peak of their power. They were too blind to see Palpatine coming from the shadows, and that's why they failed. So I would say that Rey's training is as equally justified as Luke's was. I personally like it. That it's interesting and actually fun to disagree with you because it's it gives me a perspective how different people interpret that scene, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, let me take a look. What's my next question to you? How are we doing on time? I think are we fine?
We're good.
We're good. Okay. Yeah. Which concept did you enjoy more? A Rey as a no one or Rey as a Palpatine? And which one serves the character better?
I really preferred Rey Nobody, and I felt like if the sequel trilogy was telling us anything, it was that your family doesn't matter. You know, look at Kylo Ren. He's the son of Han Solo and Leia Organa, and he's an absolute garbage can of a human being. Like, your family, your name doesn't matter. What matters is what you do with your life and how you use it. And I thought that the message of Rey Nobody was really moving to me because she was so focused on going back to Jakku, waiting for her parents, waiting for them to come back, and to be told, like, they're not coming back. You need to move on with your life and become a Jedi, grow, learn, become so much more than your parents ever were. And Rey Palpatine, besides feeling like it doesn't really fit with what we saw in 7 and 8, I just really don't like, because then it just sort of make Star Wars just about these two families. Like it's always about Palpatine and it's always about the Skywalkers. And I love the idea that anyone could be a Jedi, that anyone could have this gift and become this powerful.
Yeah, the closing shot to the Last Jedi is amazing. I love the kid with the broom.
Yeah.
And the possibility that just the spark of imagination that it gives you as a viewer. It's like, oh my God, this kid could become somebody. They know the legend of Luke Skywalker and they're inspired by it. But I agree. I think it's unanimously, most people would agree that Rey No-One works a lot better. And actually, Rey Palpatine is a detriment to her character. But I understand where it's coming from. I think it's unfair to say that only sequel movies are reactionary filmmaking. All of the filmmaking had retconning and the influence of criticism and how fans respond to it has always been there. You could look at the original Star Wars trilogy and find how Lucas refines his ideas. Some things perhaps were portrayed in a way that wasn't the original intent. It always happens with artists. Even the way that he talks about his films. At one point, Lucas is known to have said that he was planning 4 trilogies. In another interview, he says that the saga of Skywalkers and this trilogy, this series of films is over after episode 6. There's nothing else to tell. And I agree with him. The logical conclusion to these characters is over after episode 6. So things constantly move around. There's always a new generation of fan, a new generation of filmmakers who want to come in and revisit the same familiar story. It happened during ancient Greek classical period. People, created the myth of Hercules, and several hundreds of years later, there's another island off the Greece that has its own cult of Hercules, and they would continue spinning the story because what's powerful and enjoyable, people always want to revisit that. And when we get to Rey Palpatine, I'm like, okay, so he's basically trying to justify why Rey's so powerful because fans criticized that they called her name, that says she's Mary Sue. He wants to have some. I don't believe JJ for a second when he said that they wanted Palpatine's return always. They knew it from day one. Like, no, you didn't. I'm sorry. You didn't. Like, it's okay. I personally enjoy the Rise of the Skywalker. It's a deeply flawed film. So are the prequels to me, but I enjoy watching it because there's still a lot of adventuring going on, and there's still, and to me, honestly, to this day, Rey is no one. She's not a Palpatine because it's regardless what the story is telling you, it is you are the one who is experiencing the end product. So you could tell, like, oh, legends are still as real to me as everything else. You have a group of the fandom menace, like, oh my God, Disney ruined it. You're the end user. You're the guy who's enjoying this stuff. Can't you tell to yourself what's real Star Wars?
Yeah.
Would you like or hope to see Rey in the future projects?
I think I might. I guess it really depends on what they do with her. I would be really interested in Rey trying to recreate the Jedi Order, but I guess the key thing that Luke taught her is don't make it like it was before. That doesn't work. It needs to be something new. I would like that. I would like that, especially if Finn was along, because I guess what I was waiting for the whole trilogy was just confirmation that he was force sensitive at all. So something like trying to, pull up the past legends and at the same time create a new Jedi Order, I think would be really, really fun and really intriguing. I'm just not sure if they would ever go there.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I'm honestly on the fence about this because I love Daisy Ridley. She's gorgeous. She's a very talented actress. Despite all the trilogy's flaws, I love her character. She's my favorite character. She is to me what Luke was to my childhood. I love her story, and the story that could have been, and was the last episode 9 sort of sabotages a little bit. But I don't know if I want to see more of her just because of all of this crazy, insane stigma attached to it. I'm like, I'd rather have the Rian Johnson's proposed new trilogy, which is supposedly in some developmental stages right now, that distances itself from Skywalkers or Palpatines or everyone else as much as possible. Yeah. That's what I want to see. To close off this podcast, I have one last segment that if we could quickly talk about. Leia Leia is, despite of Carrie Fisher's, untimely departure, which touched, all of us as fans, she is very much a force in this story. So what did you feel about Leia? And especially I wanted to get your thoughts on how she is treated, how the legacy of Carrie Fisher is treated in episode 8.
Yeah. For me,
I'm sorry, episode 9. I'm sorry. Because,
episode,
right,
yeah.
because is in episode 8, she's still in there.
She's still in there.
Right, she passes away in episode 9. My fault. Go ahead.
So from 7 and 8, the sense I got was that Leia was fulfilling the mentor role. I guess in a way like Obi-Wan, but without the Force sense that, she's there to guide Rey. She's there to give her encouragement. She's there to, send her off in search of Luke. And I guess that's where the untimely death of Carrie Fisher makes me really wonder what they were going to do with her in episode 9, because they are just using footage that was unused in episode 7. So she has this very unreal quality where I know she's there, but I also know that they're filming the scenes and she's not there. So it's like she's not quite there. And then her death, while I like how it's able to reach out to Kylo and really the turning point for him, I sort of wanted one member of the original trilogy to survive the sequel trilogy. And
Lando does.
Lando does, although we didn't get to see him till episode 9.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious to see what they would have done with her, because in the sequel trilogy, she's the leader, she's the mentor, she's General Leia. And it just really hurts me to know that she doesn't make it to the end. She doesn't get to see that they were finally able to win.
Yeah. Her passing in the film, the Leia's passing, was actually a surprise for me, because when they said they're going to honor the legacy of Carrie Fisher, I didn't automatically register it as like, oh, they're going to kill her off in a meaningful way. Throughout this new trilogy, I also felt like her character was evolving and growing, because the only way to bring the legacy cast back was to give them new conflicts and new struggles and hurdles. Yeah. Otherwise, they don't make any sense in there. And each one had, Leia and Han both function as this failed family and hurt family, where they that's how they feel about themselves, because they tried to do everything they could for this kid, and yet he became this monster. So she's there as this mother who has failed, and now she finds this new light in Rey when she encounters her. And in episode 8, it feels like she is this old veteran, this war dog, not obviously with guns, even though she knows how to handle it. This veteran who says, like, look, it's my time is done here. I need to pass the torch. Like, these kids need to learn how to do it. And to me, she was that authority figure to Poe Dameron. It wasn't Haldo. Haldo was like a soccer mom. It's like, oh, you stupid boy, I'm going to teach you. She was a character that doesn't work for me. I have nothing against the actress. I'm not going to say any negative stuff in there. I actually enjoyed Haldo as a character in Leia novel, in the book. But there, she just doesn't work. She makes, excuse me, she makes Poe feel stupid. Like, suddenly he was this poster child of the resistance who is like ace pilot, and now he's an idiot that they can't invest their secrets into. I'm like, what the heck? But Leia was there as that mother figure and as the one who passes on the torch. And in episode 9 actually is my favorite bits with Leia. And I felt that her passing was wonderfully done. Amazing. Like, we know it's not real Leia in real time shooting those scenes, but they did the absolute best. They squeezed it. They went like for the mileage, man. Like they put all the script around her, all the actors around her. And I really felt stunned by the parallel action sequence where Kylo and first of all, when Kylo is about to kill her in episode 8, that kind of emotional note that he almost murdered his mother carries over into episode 9. And in episode 9, where he fights Rey on Death Star and all that water is splashing, and it's a very tumultuous kind of like scene. And then when she wounds him, he's not hurt only physically, he's hurt spiritually.
Yeah.
And the only way that he, like Leia as a mother, at like, I almost want to burst into tears because she's mothered like to till the moment she dies. She's like, I'm gonna do everything for my kid. If it's gonna mean reaching out to him across the stars before I die, that's what the heck I'm gonna do because there's still good in him. And when he is healed and she passes away in that moment, I'm like, what a beautiful moment to say goodbye to that character of passing of old and something new is born. Ben Skywalker is reborn. He's back. And to me, when they say, what is the rise of the Skywalker? Is it Rey saying, well, I'm a Skywalker too? No, that's the whole point of the film. That's the pinnacle. That's the climax of the film. Ben is back. You don't need to maintain for the rest of the film in the physical form, live happily ever after. He is back. He is healed spiritually. And it's all thanks to Leia. And I think it's the most significant way that Leia could have added to this entire saga. She brought this hero back. And the last moment that I also wanted to mention, I'm sorry, like we're running too much over time. There's actually one bit that I wanted to return and ask you about Rey. I wanted to ask you about that romance, the very different kind of romance that we saw between Ben and Rey Skywalker versus something like Han and Leia. Or Anakin, obviously, and Padme, which was very romantically involved, traditional kind of like relationship, which turned sour and, things happened there. It turned out being a tragedy. How did you feel about the relationship between Kylo and Rey?
So I guess I'm not a shipper, but coming out of The Force Awakens, I was really feeling like Rey and Finn on the lines of like they cared so much about each other, but then obviously the next two films sort of let that go by the wayside. And what I found really interesting about Rey and Kylo / Ben was that connection they had. It really made it, I think, really made it intense and really made it of like a visual way of showing, how connected they were. And so then when Rey says, I think I could save him, I believed her a lot more than if they hadn't had something like that, because it felt in a way like they're completely different people, but also that they're very broken inside when it deals with their family, her being left, and then him and everything that happened. So I liked the physical sign of like how connected they were with that Force connection. I'm not sure I, in the end, really bought a romance between the two of them, but that may have just been the side of me that was still like, oh, Rey and Finn.
So you didn't believe that kiss at the end of 9?
No. Well, I guess the part that it was like she was dead and then he brought her back and then he dropped down dead, it didn't really work for me. I remember being in the theaters watching it with my sister, and my sister was sort of like,
that's how my brother and my friend felt, exactly that reaction. It's like, what the heck is this?
It was like, what? And so I don't know. I think it's the way, like, when they're dead, they just suddenly flop over like a dead fish. That just sort of ruined the vibe for me a bit.
Wow. Okay. Very, very interesting. Yeah, I'll wrap up very quickly. I do appreciate that you stayed over with me and we had this. I always love talking to you and hearing like your thoughts about it, and how a different fan looks at these things, and
yeah.
that's what people draw from it and how they internalize, and that's why these movies are so endearing to them. I believed that Finn and Rey ain't happening from episode 7. The moment that she tells him, look, I'm buying a ship off here, I gotta bounce, she friend zones him right away. You see that hug, it's like, that's not a romantic hug. Like, it's like, nah, this kid is, no, friend zone right away. There's so much sexual tension between her and Kylo Ren across all three films. When he says, I need her, who is this girl? Bring her over here. It's like he's extracting that information from her, but because Adam Driver is such a magnificent actor, he adds more layers to the character that perhaps was in the script. The way that he looks at her, remember, she's like, you're a monster. And he takes off that helmet in episode 7. And you see this handsome young man with like flowing hair. And she's like, ooh, for a second. Ooh, like, he's kind of bad, but he's kind of raw too. Like, what's happening here? There's a lot of tension happening there. And I think it's very reasonable because, like you mentioned before, you said it beautifully. They're very traumatized, and they're two young people who can invest into each other and share feelings because he is abandoned by his family and he feels loner that, you know, they put him on a pedestal and he couldn't live up to the Skywalker legacy name. She's a loner that people didn't care for her. Her parents left her behind. She's always waiting for them. And that telescoping thing across episode 8 and 9, they're constantly checking each other and where they're at. When she tells him, look, can you put something on? And he's like shirtless. There's a moment of once again, sexual tension. But once again, there's also that experience of like, oh, that he's basically lost in life. He doesn't know who he's, and that draws her to him. That's what she wants to save. She's not saving him for the cause, you know, for the rebels, because she needs another lightsaber, boots on the ground. You know, she wants to save him because she's into him. And I personally believed the kiss at the end of 9. I loved it. I loved that scene. Besides that, we may argue like how the actors are directed to perform their death sequences.
Right.
Like first Rey dies. I'm like, that was such a tag back and forth, that scene, that I could have believed anything could have been like, are they actually going to kill the hero of this trilogy and Ben Solo will have to live for the rest of his days and that's his punishment? Because that would have been quite a severe punishment because he loves her by that point. They have a kiss. I'm like, oh my God, keep her dead. That would be awesome. So unexpected, so courageous. But then he heals her. I'm like, oh, wait a second. He's healing her because it's something that his grandfather couldn't do. He couldn't bring Padme back to, but he's able to do it. But hold on a second. He can't have all the prizes now. He has to pay for what he has committed. He killed patricide. He's killed his own father. And then he dies.
Yeah.
And Rey is almost like, she almost wants to crash and burn and be like emotionally devastated, but then she understands that she needs to let go of things because that's a lesson in life. The people that you love are not always there for you. And God forbid, sometimes, like my older brother passed away, you know, when I was a young kid, I was 19 years old. Sometimes people leave you. And George Lucas states himself, sometimes you need to say goodbye, like he said to his franchise. And there was a powerful lesson learned in there. And to me, her, like later on going to Tatooine, disposing those lightsabers, like, by the way, I'm Skywalker too. I'm like, it doesn't matter who you are. You already showed me who you are through your actions. And I personally thought that all of that little connection that they shared culminated in a powerful romantic scene, and at least one kiss shared between what could have been, you know?
Yeah.
Do you have any closing thoughts or statements like on how we talked about the sequels now? I'm pretty sure I'll find other awesome topics for us to discuss, but if you have any closing comments, please.
Yeah, I guess just in thinking of Rey, one of the things I loved about Rey was like all the times that she would just get that like ugly, angry look on her face. That like here we have, you know, the heroine of the trilogy, but they don't feel this urge to make her pretty all the time. That there were quite a few bits where Rey is just like grimacing her way through things. And that was fine because that's what heroes do when they get in these uncomfortable situations. And I think that was what I loved about Daisy's portrayal of her, was how real she felt at times.
Yeah, I do apologize about the background noise, but I was actually, let's wait for it to pass a little bit. Sorry guys, this is New York City saying hello. It's welcoming you. You know, I was completely sold by Daisy Ridley's performance. I think she's a Beautiful, beautiful actress. She knows what she's doing. And even though none of the sequel films lived up to that potential that I was hoping it would, a lot of very raw emotions and tensions that we saw in The Force Awakens first trailer when it was revealed, I said to myself back then, the hype was unimaginable. I'm like, please don't flop. At the very least, if this movie gives me some kind of emotional connection, those raw, unrefined feelings, I think I'm going to be on board with it, no matter how flawed it is. Because to me, at the end of the day, characters and feelings are the things that I come to and I fall in love with in Star Wars. It's not lightsabers and X-Wings. And we saw Rey cry in that trailer, and she's very emotional in the first trailer of The Force Awakens. And I felt that they were able to maintain that emotional tension. Whether the scenes work or not, whether the script works or not, whether the entire trilogy works or not, I would argue that the sequel trilogy had a lot more. It knew how to hold your attention with tense moments, something that the prequels didn't do. Actors just regurgitated their script lines, and more often than not, I couldn't identify with them because I wasn't feeling anything, you know? So that was my take on it. And Daisy Ridley, she carried, and obviously Adam Driver being an amazing actor that he is.
Yeah.
The main heroes carried those films.
Yeah.
Meg, could you please remind our audience where to find you? What do you have coming up next in terms of your reviews and so on?
Sure. Yep. I'm on YouTube as Meg Reviews, and I'm also on Instagram as The Meg Reviews, where I'll post some cool, like, closet cosplay stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I am reading Destiny's Way in the New Jedi Order series. I've just finished up Race to Crash Point Tower in the High Republic, and I'll be moving on to Out of the Shadows next.
Yeah, I want to read Out of Shadows myself, and if time coincides when you and I finish it, maybe we'll sit down and have a talk just about that book and see how it fares. Guys, once again, thank you so much for watching our podcast. Please support Meg Reviews. Go check out her channel. There's very few people on YouTube that I know of that talk about Star Wars books with such expertise. Please like this video. Leave your comments down below for us. See what your thoughts are. What do you think about the sequel trilogy and the original saga? Was Leia an influence on you and so forth? We would love to hear your thoughts. Take care, everybody. We'll see you guys later.